Drawing Spider-Man in my style, part 4, laying the inks. All right, now we're gonna do the inks of the Spider-Man. I personally like the G pen, and that's just a personal preference. So when you use inks, just do whatever's comfortable for you. Again, I personally use the G pen just because I like the smoothest effect of how the pen works. And my style typically relies a lot more on a smooth appearance because it kind of complements the way I do coloring. And so with the inks, the first thing again I always focus on is kind of the middle of the eyes and focus on like the block shading with the inks. So I focus really on the smooth lines. And again, the G pen gives me kind of the smooth effect that I like that really complements my overall aesthetic and style that I go for. One of the key things you want to do is make sure you use varied line weights. Try to employ a different line thickness, and because it's going to help with depth and dimension. What I mean by that is here you can kind of see my line weight is a lot thicker here, but when it comes down here, I kind of thinned it out, and it's going to be thinner in some of the other areas. That helps create a lot of the depth, and it's going to help overall when you try to help with the depth and the dimensions. The thicker lines used for outlines for his body and overall like the shading areas, kind of like in here. And then I use the thinner lines for the internal details like the web lines, suit, and then the subtle muscle definition, which would be like in this area when I do it. So then the second part again, I kind of do the same process over and over. That way it helps with consistency. So then again, I focus on like the block shading. So then the block shading, like we talked about doing the drawing phase, just drawing out the blocks. Here I actually use the you can use the ink fill tool, like the fill tool, or you can use the polyline tool. So when I do the inks, I do just use the ink fill tool to do a rapid thing. One of the things that you want to do when you do big blocks of shading here, you can see that I left out a space. You want to leave out spacing, and what that's going to do is leaving gaps represents kind of like a shine. So when you're inking, you want to strategically leave small uninked gaps within the solid black areas or along the edges of the line, and that suggests light reflection and a sense of shine or movement, which also again creates a lot of contrast that help out later on when you're doing the color phase. Again, now I'll start working the smaller inner details, which is the lines. So again, I always work kind of out to in. I use the bigger things like block shading and then the eye structures, and then I'll start moving to like the fine details. So here, I just start adding the lines of the costume, thinner lines as well to help facilitate that contrast that we talked about. So you see on the outsides the thicker lines. Around here, we got the thicker lines. And then in the inside, we have the smaller, thinner lines. And it gives a great aesthetic, and it's going to work well when you start doing the color phase. The last thing, again, I'm going to add is the inks for the senses. Here, you can kind of, I chose the same line weight just because I kind of want them to be symmetrical in size. So I didn't really alter the thickness of the lines there. And then one of the things I personally like to do, and this is just a personal technique of mine, is I like to give some kind of contrast with my inks. So what you tend to see is I like cross hatching a lot. So I'll come down here and some of the areas to kind of give it a unique contrast, I'll cross hatch it and maybe add some ink blots just to kind of give it some kind of design contrast with the rest of the stuff, and it's going to look well when you put the color work onto it.